Hey everyone, today we are taking a look at a 1958 Ferrari 250 Testa Rossa. These cars are halos of the golden era of racing for their stunning bodywork, their V12 engines, and successful racing careers, with wins at Sebring, the Targa Florio, and Le Mans in the late 1950s to early 60s. This car was bodied by Scaglietti and is known as a Pontoon Fender model for its flowing bodywork and cutaway fenders that protrude out and around the front tires, giving the car a stunning look that is hard to beat. In my opinion, it is one of the most beautiful cars ever made, and it is a dream come true to be here with it today. Only about 20 examples of this car were ever built, and price estimates currently sit between $20 to $50 million to get your hands on one, so it has to be one of the most sought after cars ever made. This is chassis 710TR, which was the first customer car of the 250 Testa Rossa run, the only car to come with a removable front nose cone, as well as the only car as far as I know that is on permanent public display. That's right, you can come see this car in person yourself at the Simeone Museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but today I'm going to give you an extra up-close look at this wonderful piece of history. Let's take a look. The first thing that I want to show you is a tour around the bodywork. This all-aluminum body was crafted by Scaglietti with the intention of providing greater airflow to cool the front brakes and channels for heat and exhaust to exit past the car. This is what led to the open airflow design between the engine and the front tires, as well as the recessed bodywork behind them. The headlights were placed inside a covered housing of the pontoon fenders, sculpted to let airflow around them and into the brake channels. Behind the fenders, you will find a well-exposed control arm and an independent front suspension setup with coil springs, as well as the car's front drum brakes, which were installed just as manufacturers were starting to make the transition into discs. There's also a bit of ductwork that leads from a small intake at the front of the car on both sides into the footwell of the car. Midway through the engine bay, behind the front suspension, there is a cutaway for your dual exhaust pipes to make their exit, as well as an exit gill to draw heat out of the engine bay. Atop the engine bay, you will see there is a bump in the hood to allow for clearance of the car's vertically oriented carburetors, as well as an air intake built into it. The hood is held down with leather straps and metal hood latches. Don't worry, we'll undo those and take a look at what's underneath in just a bit. Moving towards the center of the car, you will see the open cockpit of the 250 Testa Rossa. All Testa Rossas were built with a two-seater roadster design, which Ferrari believed to be the most efficient design for a race car at the time, although later it was discovered to produce a large amount of drag on longer high-speed courses. On the rear deck lid, you will see there is a bit of aero to reduce drag behind the driver's head that also houses a small roll bar, albeit one that won't provide much protection if you're over 5 feet tall. Underneath your deck lid is your fuel tank with no room for storage, since this car was focused entirely on winning races. Finally, at the rear of the car, you can see the dual exhaust with 4 tips sticking out from under the car, clearing a tapered rear end with a simple brake light design housed inside of 2 vertical fins above the rear wheels. Now it's time for something fun. Trying to get inside this thing. There is a small door on each side of the Testa Rossa for you and your passenger to get in. To open the door, you have to reach over the bodywork and find a spring-loaded latch, which once you give a good tug sideways, releases from the latch and opens up for you. You might think that since this car doesn't have a roof, it should be easy to get into, but it's actually the exact opposite. If you don't want to step on the seat, you have to get your right leg completely in and around the steering wheel, hold yourself up with both hands on either the seat bolsters or the transmission tunnel, lift your left leg up into the footwell, and then finally lower yourself down into the seat. Congrats, you're now sitting in a 250 Testa Rossa. In front of you, you will see the historic 3-spoke Nardi steering wheel and your gauge cluster, which includes your oil temp, your oil pressure, tachometer, amp meter, and water temp, with funny enough no speedometer, which is interesting because this was built as a customer car. To your right, you have the gear shift for the car's 4-speed manual transmission. First is to your top left, down into second, which can get a bit stuck, up and right into third, and finally down and right into fourth. There's also a reverse gear on the far top right with a manual lockout switch. Down in your footwell, there is your classic 3-pedal setup with your clutch, brake, and gas from left to right. Make sure you're wearing narrow shoes if you ever try to drive one of these because space is tight. On the passenger side of the cabin, you have your fuse panel, and down on the floor is actually where your battery goes. So make sure your passenger doesn't need much legroom because there isn't much to spare. You have to remember this thing was built to race, so there are a lot of things exposed and out in the open on this car. When you do finally have to get out of the 250 Testa Rossa, reach over to undo the door latch, Gently open the door wide enough for you to get out. You have to hold yourself up on the seat bolsters or the transmission tunnel. Then you have to get your left leg out and plant it on the floor, then slowly slide yourself sideways out of the car. Taking a look at the seats, they definitely show signs of aging, but are honestly in really good condition given the age and history of this car. While the door is open, you can also see this small support that mounts the exhaust pipes to the exposed chassis rails that are visible in the interior of the car, which is a pretty cool detail in my opinion. Finally, let's take a look at the engine bay. If you undo the metal latches and leather straps I mentioned earlier, you can lift off the cover and reveal the glorious 3-liter Colombo V12 engine. The Colombo V12 is the power plant for some of the most valuable cars in the world in the iconic Ferrari 250 series. This engine produces 300 horsepower, equal to 100 horsepower per liter, which was a point of pride for Ferrari at the time, and is fed by 6 dual-barrel Weber 38 DCN carburetors. One thing that you'll notice is that the valve covers are painted bright red, and this is actually where the car gets its namesake, as Testa Rossa means red head in Italian. Personally, I cannot get enough of this car, and I think it is a gorgeous piece of automotive history. If you ever have the chance to see one in person, I highly recommend it. Thanks again to the Simeone Museum in Philadelphia, PA for letting me spend the day with such an amazing dream car of mine. If you want to see this car in person, it's always on display, and try to come on one of their monthly demo days where this car is often run in their back parking lot. Because although it's amazing standing still, it's even better in motion. Check them out if you get the chance. Thanks for watching, and click that like and subscribe button for more great automotive content.